Hello and welcome back to another update as we cover the latest developments throughout the front line in the Russo-Ukrainian war. We start out in the direction of Avdiivka, where there are these advancements by the Russians here to the west of the city. The Russians have advanced in the direction of Tonenka from the northeast, and with this assaults are taking place both to the northeast and to the southeast of Tonenka. They've also advanced further in the southern parts of the reservoirs and lakes here to the south of Orlivka. And with the fighting taking place here in the gray zone in between the Russian positions and the Ukrainian positions in Orlivka, you also see that the Russians have managed to capture the fortifications the Ukrainians had along this forest line here to the south of Stepove, west of the coke plant. And with this, the Russians have secured the flank for future assaults towards Orlivka. It is reported that the Russians are storming and attacking Orlivka from the east, both from the direction of Lastashkina and the Avdiivsky coke plant. There's also reports of fighting within Tonenka. Some sources even report a Russian control over the eastern parts and fighting us in the Dacha area. This is reported that the Ukrainians are fighting in a retreat where they are trying to withdraw to the next defensive lines, which are here by the heights to the west of Orlivka and Tonenka. While they are doing so, they're trying to hold their positions and slow down the Russian advances as much as possible so that they can prepare their positions and make sure to hold on to it to prevent further Russian advances after the capture of Orlivka and Tonenka, which are already fated to fall under Russian hands. It seems that the Russians have also started offensive operations here in the north to the west of Stepove in the direction of Berdishi, which is why we're seeing the fighting here to the south of Stepove to secure the flank. And with this, we see it is likely that the Russians will start offensive operations towards Berdishi to enter the fortifications and the heights of the Ukrainians from a better position. Attacking head-on directly towards the Ukrainian fortifications by moving through Orlivka would be dangerous, as such the Russians would likely try to gain access to the heights here to the north and to the west of Berdishi through an area that is a less elevation difference. As we see here in the direction of Stepove, here in the northern parts, we see that the height elevation is about 213 meters. To the northwest of Berdishi is about 208, and by Selmihivka it's 200. But by Orlivka it is 166, and by Donetsk it's 170. So we see that there's a significant elevation difference here between the western parts of this village chain and the eastern parts, while in the direction of Stepove in the northern parts, the Russian positions are already in the heights, and they can advance through those heights to gain access to the flank of the Ukrainian positions here in between Berdishi and Umanke. The fighting here by Stepove had a significant development, and that is that the Russians destroyed their first visually confirmed destruction of a Abrams tank. We have this video here where the Russians were using a UAV to find this Abrams tank and pretty much stalk it for the necessary equipment to arrive to destroy the tank, after which we get this video here which shows the Abrams tank burning. And then we have this photo here which shows better quality footage of the tank itself, so that we are sure it's an Abrams tank and not some other tank. And with this, we have confirmation that the Russians have indeed destroyed the first Abrams tank. With it burning, there's no hope of it just being damaged. It is definitely destroyed. We do see here to the south in the direction of Sheverne that there is this geolocated footage which shows Russian positions within the village, and taking a look at this video here, we see that they are patrolling the village with no real issue. There's no shelling, there's no counterattacks, there's nothing to clear. The Russians have full control over Sheverne, and this indicates that the advancements into Tonenka have indeed been confirmed, as if the Ukrainians did have possessions here in the southern outskirts of Tonenka, then the Russian soldiers within Sheverne would not be so carefree. This pretty much confirms that the Russians have indeed attacked and stormed Tonenka and possibly even gaining positions, or at the very least pushed the Ukrainians to the western parts, as this confirms the gray zone of Tonenka. Moving north to the direction of Bakhmut, we see here that the Russians have indeed also made these advancements to the east of the village, with this geolocated footage confirming those advancements into the forest lines to the east of Ivanivske. We continue to get this geolocated footage after these advancements have happened to confirm that the advancements, the updates I give are the reality and not just something I make up. And with this, we also see the confirmation of the advancements of the Russians reaching the village of Ivanivska, and the fighting continues within it as well. Back to the direction of Orlivka, here to the west of Avdiivka, there's reports that the Russians aren't just attacking from the two sides. It has now also been reported that they're attacking from a third side, which could either be here from the north, from the Stepova direction through the forest lines, or from the south, flanking from the south of Lastoshkine towards Orlivka and in a southern pincer. This could be supported if the Russians have control over the eastern parts of Sanenke, where fighting would be taking place here to the south of Orlivka, and then some units moving in a southern direction towards the northern parts towards Orlivka. At the same time, it's reported that the Ukrainian positions in Orlivka are being heavily bombarded by not just heavy artillery by the Russian side, but also FAB 500s landing throughout the village. This is the main reason the Ukrainians are withdrawing from these villages. The heavy bombardments on the Russian side are causing casualties on the Ukrainian positions in these unfortified areas here to the east of the actual fortified areas. And with that, the Ukrainians, the longer they stay, the more casualties they're going to take from the airstrikes and the artillery being struck on their positions. The Russians also storming the positions, which of course also provides with losses, but under the cover fire of artillery and the Ukrainians' lack of artillery, it is unlikely to be a large number. Talking about artillery, there is a beacon of hope for the Ukrainians, and that is that the EU is currently negotiating with the Indians in hope that they can buy artillery from them in numbers that are in the hundreds of thousands. If the Ukrainians receive hundreds of thousands of shells from the Indians, they can last yet another year with the current rate of artillery consumption by the Ukrainians. So this would allow them to hold on for a long time and delay the war, as they would be able to respond to the Russian artillery fire at a necessary rate. What we're currently seeing is that the Ukrainians are rationing whatever supply of artillery they have left, with some sources even claiming that they will run out of it by March. But then again, those same sources claimed that Russia would run out of artillery shells and tanks and missiles, etc. in the first month of the war. And here we are 2 years later, and the Russians are still out shooting the Ukrainians 6-1. It is reported by the German newspaper Spiegel about this negotiations with India. It is unofficial, however, due to India not wanting to sour their relations with Russia. At the same time, we also hear reports from the German intelligence and the German Ministry of Defense that Ukraine could run out of shells by June, specifically giving a specific number. At the same time, the German Ministry of Defense also say that despite there's a shortage of shells, there's not a shortage of money. And the EU is already going to supply 170,000 artillery shells by the end of March. But that is still less than the 1 million that they promised by this January, so 2 months ago almost. And therefore we see that the Ukrainians are going to continue receiving shells, but at a slow rate, because 170,000 by the end of March, that is less than what they would have used in the first 3 months of the year, and that is not a sustainable rate. Moving back to the Bakhmut direction, we see here, based on the defense fortifications map, that although the Russians have managed to capture the fortifications here to the north of Bohdanivka and to the south and east of it, all the way down to Ivanivske and to the east of Ivanivske as well, there is these fortifications here to the northwest of Ivanivske protecting the supply line, which indicates why the Russians have not cut it before storming the village itself. It is because the Ukrainians have fortifications to the north of the village. They also have significant fortifications here by the forest lines, with a multi-layered defensive trench area here to the center by the road to the west of the cemetery area, and lines of trenches and fortifications by the forest lines before moving further closer to Chesev Yar with additional layers of fortifications. With that, it is likely that the Russians will continue focusing on Ivanivske itself to bypass these fortifications, moving through to the canal area. There are also fortifications by the Ukrainians here, but by aligning the front line to the canal, they can move through the forest areas here and attack the Ukrainian fortifications from the side instead of head on, instead of from an open field where the Ukrainian trenches by the forest line would be allowed to shoot at any upcoming Russian positions all throughout this whole area. And if they attack from the south through the forest areas, then they would have much better positions to attack the Ukrainian fortifications. As such, it is likely that the main force of the Russians will push through Ivanivske before advancing further in the direction of Chasiv Yar. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.